Okay, so in our final video, we're going to look at what happens when we've got negative fractional powers. Okay, so the first one here is when we've got 16 to the power negative half. Now, if you think back to last lesson, we dealt with negative powers. Okay, so you've got to think back to what we did there to understand it. And the process quite simply told us that if you have a negative power, you write it as 1 over whatever this is, so it's 16, and then the power becomes positive. Okay, so 16 to the power minus half can be written as 1 over 16 to the power positive half. Okay, and then of course we know what power half is. Yeah, power half just means to square root. Okay, 16 to the power half is the square root of 16. And we know the square root of 16. So we know the square root of 16 is 4, yeah? Because 4 times 4 is 16. So we've shown that 16 to the power negative half is 1/4. Okay, let's look at the second example. 36 to the power negative half again. So because it's minus, because the power is minus, rewrite it as 1 over. You always do this, it's always 1 over. In this case then 36 to the power positive half, okay? So it becomes positive half there. And we know, just like before, when you've got the power to be positive half, that just means square root. Okay, we saw that in the first video example today. So square root then of 36 is what that means. And of course we know what the square root of 36 is. It's going to be 6, isn't it? Because 6 times 6 is 36. So we've shown here that 36 to the power negative half is equal to 1/6. Okay, so let's look at this, the next one. So in this one, we've got negative 2/3. All right, but again, you deal with it because it's negative power, write it as 1 over. We're always going to do this with negative powers. So it'll become then positive power of 2/3 when you write it as 1 over. Now, if you remember in the last video, when you don't have a unit fraction, okay, you've got to sort of make it into a unit fraction in order to determine the value. So what we'll do is, okay, we'll rewrite this and put it in a bracket, yeah? So we put the 8 in the bracket, but instead of 2/3 now, we're going to put it as a unit fraction, so it'll be 1/3. Now I haven't forgotten about that 2, because it's 2/3, isn't it? So what I'll do, I'll close the bracket and I'll put the 2 on the outside. Okay, that's what we saw in the last video. And then you just got to appreciate then, in that bracket, you've got power third. And from the first video, we saw power third just means cube root. So, power third is the cube root. So cube root of 8. And of course the cube root of 8, we've seen, haven't we? And it's quite easy, isn't it? It's just 2, because 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So in that bracket, you've got cube root of 8, which is 2. And you don't need to write that bracket again. You don't need to draw it once you've done that. But don't forget, you've got to then square it, haven't you? Okay. So then we get 1 over, well, 2 squared is 4. So my answer to this, 8 to the power negative 2/3 is equal to 1/4. Quite a bit of work to get there, but it's so important that you show every step. Okay, let's look at the next one. 900 to the power negative 3/2. Okay, so it will be 1 over again because it's negative power. This time 900 to the power 3/2. Okay, so we change the positive power there. Now it's not a unit fraction, so we need to make it into a unit fraction. So we'll bring in a bracket, just like we've done before. 900, and we'll write to the power half, because it's 3/2 here, so let's write it as 1/2, a unit fraction, and take the 3 out. Now we've got to think now, what does the power half mean? And of course the power half means square root. Okay, so we've got in there the square root of 900. Now, can we think about doing this without a calculator? And actually it's quite straightforward because we've got an even amount of zeros. So when you've got an even amount of zeros, when you square root it, just halve it. Halve the amount of zeros here. So I've got 2 zeros, halve it, I'll end up with 1 0. And square root 9 is 3. So the square root of 900 will be 3 and the 0, 30. Okay, so we have here 1 over 30, and then we've got to cube it. That's actually quite easy because 30 times 30 times 30, let me write it here so we can see that. Well, it's easy, isn't it? Because you just do 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, okay? And then the 3 zeros added on, so it'll be 27,000 on the bottom. So 900 to the power minus 3 over 2 is 1 over 27,000. Let's look at this one then to finish off. So 125 to the power minus 4 thirds. Okay, well, again, you write this as 1 over 125 to the power positive 4 thirds. Now it's not a unit fraction, so we're going to rewrite it as a unit fraction, which would be 1/3, of course, and take that 4 outside. We then got to think about what this means. 1/3, of course, it means the cube root, as we've seen so many times now, and then power 4 out there. Now the cube root of 125, okay, ends in a 5, so just try a few numbers. If you want, you try 4 times 4 times 4, that gets you to 64. That's no good, but it's going to be 5, isn't it? If you think about it, 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. So this turns out to be 1 over cube root of 125 is 5, and then to the power 4. And you can work that out. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 works out to be 625. Okay, so in these questions, just make sure you show every step and take your time on it, and you will get to the answer every time.